Which is better, dismissal with prejudice or without prejudice? It sounds complicated. What does that even mean? Well, if you're interested in the criminal law or you have a case where this might apply, stay tuned because this is the video for you.
Well, hello there once again, Jonathan. I see that we need to go back and review what was going on with the story of the woman who was caught in adultery. And then she was nefariously brought before Jesus in order to have him judge her according to the law of Moses. And then condemn her, of course, condemn her to death. And as we know, Jesus was bound by the law. Remember, not one jot, not one tittle was to be removed. Right, Jonathan?
Because for verily I say to you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. And that was the only way to make possible to fulfill all his words. Even though I told you and you believe not the words that I say, because there's only this possible truth.
Jesus had to follow the laws. He was bound by them. And you keep bringing that point up over and over like I have some type of disagreement with you about that point. But I don't.
But to keep his words, also he had to let not one jot nor tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. So if you want to say the most possible plausible story is when he keeps his words, then he had also to keep all his words.
That's what he was sent here to do, Jonathan. He had to fulfill the laws perfectly. And that's exactly what he did with the woman caught in adultery. He followed the law to a T. And by doing just that, he was able to dismiss her case with prejudice. And by saying that it was dismissed with prejudice, let me ask you, Jonathan, do you know what that means? Because that means that it can never be brought up again at a later date. It's kind of like double jeopardy. But that's exactly what you're doing. You're trying to rehash an adultery case that took place and was dismissed with prejudice from over 2,000 years ago. But for some convenient reason, Jonathan, you keep acting as if the woman's adultery case was dismissed without prejudice. So now you think that gives you the right to reopen a case that was actually already permanently closed and start to carry out punishment. It doesn't give you the right to do that, Jonathan. The case was closed. Permanently.
Dismissal of your case. Yay! Great news. Your case is getting dismissed. But is it going to be dismissed with prejudice or without prejudice? Which is better? I mean, does it even make sense, those words? So you would think, I think most of the clients that we talk to would prefer in their mind that a case be dismissed without prejudice, right? Prejudice is bad, right? You know, I'm not prejudiced. Why would I want that word? And interestingly, it's pretty much the opposite. So dismissal without prejudice, let's say the prosecutor moves to dismiss your case. I move to dismiss Mr. Smith's case without prejudice. Well, without prejudice means without prejudice to the state, to their ability to refile the case if they choose to. So in criminal law, there's a concept called jeopardy, right? Have you ever heard, hey, you can't be put in double jeopardy? And I'm not talking about the TV show. I'm talking about jeopardy as it relates to the Constitution. So you're not supposed to be able to be tried twice for the same offense, right? At least at the same level. You can get tried twice for the same thing. You've seen it before, state level and federal level, but technically those are different statutes. But let's make it simple. You've got a DUI case and the state moves to dismiss the case without prejudice. And that happens like if you get a blood draw and the blood result isn't back. It's pretty common for like the Everett court, for the prosecutors there to dismiss cases without prejudice. Yay, my case is dismissed. Well, jeopardy hasn't attached in that case. So if it's dismissed without prejudice, that means that prosecutor can go ahead and refile your case once the blood draw shows up. Okay? When does jeopardy attach? Well, the only time jeopardy really attaches, which means if the case is dismissed, you cannot be retried, is once a jury is sworn in a jury trial, or once the first witness is sworn in what's called a bench trial, a trial before a judge. So if the prosecutor moves to dismiss your case with prejudice, and that's how the court grants the dismissal with prejudice, that means that case can never be refiled again. That DUI cannot be refiled. That assault cannot be refiled.
And the same thing goes with an adultery case, Jonathan. It cannot be refiled either. But that's what you're trying to do.
So what about other types of dismissals? Right? What about dismissals that aren't the prosecutor choosing to dismiss the case? Well, then that can be up to the judge, right? Now, in a motion hearing, if there's a case that goes to motion and the motion is, hey, dismiss this DUI charge because the cop made an illegal stop, and everything after the stop is fruit of the poisonous tree, which means the state has no evidence, and I move to dismiss the case, oftentimes the judge will dismiss that case with prejudice, okay?
Remember, Jonathan, all of those men that were accusing her of adultery, they were all partaking in the same sin that she was being accused of by them. And when Jesus confronted them and they realized that they were just as guilty of the sin of adultery as the woman was, and they all walked away, that's when the case fell apart, Jonathan. No witnesses, that means no case. Not back then, not today.
They still have the option to dismiss without because the state could come up with other evidence later, right? It's a little bit factual dependent. Let's say the state is missing a witness. We say you can't go forward without the witness. Yes, they dismiss the case. The judge dismisses the case over the prosecutor's objection. It doesn't have to be with prejudice. The judge could say without. But sometimes the judge will really make that point. No, this is with prejudice. You're done, state. Don't ever bring me this beep again, right?
And that's where I'm at on the issue, Jonathan. When Jesus asked the woman, "Where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee?" And she replied that no man was there. That was when the case was thrown out with prejudice. And I want to keep emphasizing with prejudice, because that again means, Jonathan, that case can never be reopened again. Never. But that's what you're attempting to do.
No, this is with prejudice. You're done, state. Don't ever bring me this beep again, right? So what's an example where, if your case is dismissed without prejudice, what's an example where that can come back to haunt you? And so for the most part, I think I want you to know that don't worry too much about if it's with prejudice or without. It would not be a great idea to really say, well, I'm only taking that dismissal if it's with prejudice. Let's go to trial otherwise and then risk a chance of losing. That's probably not very smart, okay? So I don't want you to worry about it for the most part. This is, education. But I have seen a situation where a prosecutor moved to dismiss an assault charge, okay, without prejudice because at the day of trial, the witness wasn't there. So the prosecutor was smart enough to know, hey, I can dismiss now without prejudice. If the court grants it without prejudice, jeopardy hasn't attached. We haven't sworn in a jury. And if I want to, I could refile this case at some time.
And if he wants to, he can refile this case at some later time. Wow, Jonathan, that sure does sound like what you're trying to do, doesn't it? Only you're trying to refile it 2,000 years later. So I guess that must mean that you've got 2 or 3 witnesses that are going to go up, right, Jonathan? Do you have the 2 or 3 witnesses needed to make it official this time? And are they going to actually testify? Because I think that's a box that you might want to try and get checked off first. Do you have enough witnesses?
And why we don't really worry about that is usually the prosecutor's not going to want to, right? They've got so many things to do. If the alleged victim isn't interested, then why should they be, right? Because that type of thing. Well, I've seen a situation where a prosecutor moved to dismiss a case without prejudice. That was granted. And a few days later, they ran into the victim in a store. And they're like, I know you. Well, I'm going to refile this case and serve you the subpoena right now because I'm so mad at the defendant and so mad at you for not trying to help me prosecute. I'm going to refile this case. So there is a situation where if it's dismissed without prejudice, that it could really come back, but it's so rare that would happen. I've seen it once in my 20 years of doing defense work, that I really wouldn't worry about it too much.
Maybe if he were to get a look at the can of worms that you've been trying to open up, Jonathan, then that would be the second case that he's seen in his entire career, where the prosecution tried to reopen a case that had already been closed. Remember, Jonathan, The case was dismissed with prejudice over 2,000 years ago. With prejudice.
So I hope you found this useful to understand the difference of with prejudice, without. Again, prejudice means prejudice to the ability of the state to refile the case, and without means they can just refile it. So if you're getting your case dismissed, you can ask your attorney to argue for with prejudice. You can ask your attorney to ask the prosecutor to dismiss it with prejudice. But for the most part, don't worry too much about it.
Remember, God's law requires that every charge must be established on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, and you don't do that by interrogating the accused directly. Now, our law comports with this. Right? What are you told? It's never happened to me, but what are you told if you get arrested? You have the right to remain silent, right? That is, you cannot be compelled to testify against yourself because it is the prosecutor's job to establish the charge against you with sufficient witnesses. Same thing in God's law.
Tell me about it, because you don't seem to want to hold your ground about anybody that would be responsible for who's going in hell and who's going in heaven. It's like for you, it doesn't exist. Judgment doesn't exist. Is that what you're trying to say here? Maybe you need to explain yourself.
And they which heard it, being convicted in their own...
Did you get a ring for your wife or not? Since you said it was all pagan practices. Did you yourself bought a ring for your wife or not? You never talk about that. You just made the video about me buying a ring for Marianne, but you don't talk about you and the ring that is around the finger of your own wife. But you don't talk about you and the ring that is around the finger of your own wife. John Quinton had not yet seen my video response and he's already claiming victory. Mr. Nyland, you have been overturned. Thank you, Gene. But John Quinton has not yet seen my answer, my response, because then there's still more overturning.
And the story of the woman taken in adultery, it's just one of them. First off, Jesus knew the law better than any of the Pharisees or Sadducees ever could. And when they brought the woman before Jesus and accused her of committing adultery, while in the very act of committing adultery, no less, all just to see if Jesus would uphold the law of Moses and have her stoned to death. Jesus knew that this was meant to be a snare to him, because if he didn't stone the adulteress to death for her adultery, Jesus could then be found guilty of not carrying out with committing adultery, no less. All just...
So now you bring this. For if the first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. So you made a whole... you've got a little bit of contradiction here. You made a whole series, many parts, shorts, about all the reason under the sun why you trust that if I'm really Elijah, I should perform upon myself circumcision, which is from the old covenant. And then in this new series, condemning Marianne with a fistful of Peter, you bring the second covenant. And you don't care anymore about the old.
to see if Jesus would uphold the law of Moses and have her stoned to death. Jesus knew that this was meant to be a snare to him, because if he didn't stone the adulteress to death for her adultery, Jesus could then be found guilty of not carrying out the sentence that an adulterer at that time would have received. You have to remember that they were still under the Old Testament laws.
So when it came for you to judge me, you brought the old law, the old covenant, and you said that if I were to be true, I should have followed it. But now when you bring back the name Marianne and her condemnation, then you say, let's go with the new covenant and forgive this wrong.
Hey there, Jonathan. You kind of sounded a little pissed in this video. You know, the one that I made about the woman who was brought before Jesus to be stoned for the sin of adultery. But why would you be pissed about me putting out nothing but pure facts? I don't get it. And I thought that I demonstrated it rather clearly in the video that I was using the Old Testament laws, but you keep insisting that I wasn't being fair in judgment.
When you compare the series that you made about me, that I need to perform circumcision to prove myself that I'm Elijah, you use the Old Testament and the Old Law and the Old Covenant. When now Marianne's name is brought up in your new series, then you say, let's bring the New Covenant. Why? Why did you not judge me equally? Then you judge her.
First of all, Jonathan, this isn't about me judging Mary Ann's actions, because that's not what I'm doing. Whether you want to think that or not, well, that's up to you, I guess. I mean, you're entitled to try to come up with whatever story that you want to come up with, Jonathan. But they've all been wrong so far. So for anybody else that might be following along out there and they're watching as Jonathan keeps making accusations that I didn't use the Old Covenant laws to judge Mary Ann like I did with him. But let me repeat, Jonathan, I'm not here to judge Mary Ann. All I'm doing here is giving you my interpretation of the story about the woman who was taken in adultery. But you don't like that, do you? And I know for sure that you're not going to like what I have this show coming up next concerning this story, because nobody ever tried to use the new covenant like you say, Jonathan. Not even Jesus. Not even Jesus. Because what he did was he used the old covenant laws against all the accusers, the ones that brought the woman before Jesus to be stoned. But ironically, instead of stoning her to death, Jesus converted her death sentence into a pardon. It's as simple as that, and he used the Old Testament laws to do it. Jesus didn't send her away after just telling her that he doesn't condemn her, only to keep it on the down low that he was going to have Peter start stoning her to death later on down the road, when it was convenient for him. But what actually happened was Jesus gave the woman a pardon because the laws weren't met, and he sent her upon her way, and he said, I too condemn you not.
Condemning Marianne with a fistful of Peter.
Where are the men? I mean, what Old Testament laws were the scribes and Pharisees referring to in John 8:5? It was either one of two passages from Deuteronomy 22. You have Deuteronomy 22:20.
I think that Marianne can see through your weakness. And now she's starting to estimate me for real. She knows that you try to please her, trying to say that the accusation should be over the man but not on the woman taken adultery. She can tell that you are very weak because you're trying to tell her what she needs to hear, but she knows better. She knows better. She told me she was aroused over the thoughts of the woman cheating with another man while the man of war was gone to wage war. So don't try to say, to comfort her, well, it was all on the man. It was the fault of man. Why they go after the woman when all the men, it was all their fault for sleeping with her. I think that by now you know exactly how she wants to be spoken, how you know her enough now that you figure out easily how you could try to please her with pleasing words that she wants to hear. But she sees through it. She knows better. She might think that you are very weak for trying it. You know how she loves to be spoken about and what words to say. But this is a real show of weakness on your part. It's a real display of weakness on your part.
22. If a man be found lying with a woman married to a husband, then they shall both of them die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. So shalt thou put away evil from Israel. Or you have Deuteronomy 22 verses 23 and 24. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto a husband, and a man find her in the city.
I mean, she did address it. How is it that the men were not accused and only the woman in the Bible? And then you remember this, and then you try to go in the same direction to please her and to make the video about where were all the men? How is it that they were not accused? You just kind of repeat her words to try to please her and to comfort her in her way of disbelief.
And lie with her. Then ye shall bring them both out to the gates of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you.
I believe this, 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 I believe this. I really believe it. I really believe it. I mean, how can I not believe it?
And the story of the woman taken in adultery, it's just one of them.
So you're not objective at all in your judgment. You're not even judging her with the same criteria that you're judging me. So I thought you were supposed to be objective in your judgment all this time about the videos with Jonathan Click and how you were supposed to be very objective. Were you ever objective? Or you lied to yourself and you had a real opinion that was not objective at all, and you took a side. And the side that you decided to take is against Jehovah. So either you made video against Jonathan Click, it was really the goal the deeper goal was to make it a conclusion to make against Jehovah, because Jonathan Click was not even, it was just a facade to what you were really trying to attempt to do. John Quinton saying that you're overturning, but John Quinton is not innocent to know how Marianne is presenting herself and how you present yourself using images. Because else you could have chosen another image. You're not objective anymore if you ever were. Mr. Nallon, you have been overturned. Thank you, Gene. It's like comments, emphasis, because there's only one comment, getting the spotlight. But wait and see when I'm posting this. As usual, John Quinton is going to hide somewhere for a time, trying to be forgotten. And then after that, he might come back showing the palms of his hands, claiming to be the only begotten son of the Father of heaven. But he does not know that there is yet another overturning already recorded just now. No matter how much convincing what you do, still can be overturned.
Welcome back to 9 on your side. Murder charges are dismissed against a Hamilton County man accused of shooting 2 people in Lockland.
A judge dismissed the case at the request of prosecutors who say witnesses are not cooperating. A judge dismissed the case at the request of prosecutors who say witnesses are not cooperating. Witnesses are not cooperating. Chief Investigative Reporter Craig Cheatham joins us now with exclusive details. Craig, how unusual is it for prosecutors to want to drop murder charges?
Tanya, it's extremely rare. In fact, prosecutors have surveillance video from local businesses and other evidence, but apparently without the cooperation of witnesses they have not identified, the case fell apart. But apparently without the cooperation of witnesses they have not identified, the case fell apart.
In the act of adultery with. And the men who had brought her before Jesus in order to tempt him, knowing perfectly well the very adultery laws for themselves, and that the man should be brought before the law as well and be stoned to death. So why did they only bring the woman to Jesus and not the man too? Or was the man there the entire time? John 8:7. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him cast a stone at her. And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And if anybody cares about what I think Jesus may have been writing up.
So Jesus cast the first stone because he is the only one worthy to cast the first stone. But he is not judging himself because it's Peter that he casts at her, and it's Peter that is judging her. This is how he can fulfill all his words. Because for verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. And that was the only way to make possible to fulfill all his words. Even though I told you and you believe not the words that I say, because there's only this possible truth. The only thing that you can do if you do not believe in it is to try to make up lies and to just deny the scriptures is true. Because when you say the scripture is true, you say there's mistakes in it. And when you say you got Jesus and the Father, but they are not like Jehovah, then it's the same as taking those verses and saying, well, I'm going to use those verses condemning Marianne with a fistful of Peter, and you do not use this verse about, for verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. In the day when God will judge, so who's judging? Who's God? Who's doing the judging? Who's doing the judging? Because you seem to say that it's neither Jesus nor the Father. It is the Father that's doing the judging. And the will of the Father was to use the sinner to do the judgment. When you compare the series that you made about me, that I need to perform circumcision to prove myself that I'm Elijah, you use the Old Testament and the Old Law and the Old Covenant. When now Marianne's name is brought up in your new series, then you say, let's bring the New Covenant. Why? Why did you not judge me equally? Then you judge her.
On the ground, I happen to think that Jesus was writing each of the men's names out in the dust. You know, kind of bringing it to the forth. He that is without sin among you, let him cast a stone at her. And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And if anybody cares about what I think Jesus may have been writing on the ground, I happen to think that Jesus was writing each of the men's names out in the dust. You know, kind of bringing it to the forefront of their minds and reminding them that it was themselves that was the man that was to be brought with the woman for punishment.
Voice of Gene, who is doing the judgment? Do you believe that there is anybody out there that doing judgment? Who is that God that doing judgment? Do you believe that the judgment got to be just and fair with everybody? And if it is fair and just with everybody, then since she was taken in the act of adultery, then she had to be punished. And if he didn't do at the time, then he would do it later.
It was a fair and just judgment, Jonathan. Jesus dismissed the case and let the woman go free, because he had no other choice but to do exactly that. He had to let her go. She was free, Jonathan. I mean, what don't you understand about this?
Did you yourself bought a ring for your wife or not? You never talk about that.
Because in order to be able to condemn the woman of her sin of adultery, at least by the Old Covenant law, there had to be at least 2 or 3 witnesses that would be able to testify to what she had done. But once Jesus confronted them and put it on their conscience that they were guilty of the exact same thing the woman was being condemned for, and that would be for adultery, and for that sin they should be condemned as well. So they left and never looked back. But therein lies the problem, Jonathan, because once they left, there were no longer the 2 or 3 witnesses that are needed to be able to condemn somebody. And Deuteronomy 17 verses 6 and 7 explain it the best. Verse 6, at the mouth of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall he that is worthy of death be put to death. But at the mouth of 1 witness he shall not be put to death. The hands of the witnesses shall be first upon him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. So thou shalt put the evil away from among you. And then, according to the law in verse 7, the hands of the witnesses shall be first upon him to put him to death. It wouldn't have been Jesus that threw the first stone, anyways, because he wasn't a witness to the adultery. And it's the law that the hands of the witnesses that shall be the first ones that are put upon him for death. So if there's no witnesses present to condemn the woman, and Jesus said that he didn't condemn her either, that would have to mean that there was no condemnation of that woman to carry out. So sorry, Jonathan, but the woman that was caught in adultery, Jesus set her free. And he was never going to have anybody revisit it in order to stone her to death. She was set free.
And if it is fair and just with everybody, then since she was taken in the act of adultery, then she had to be punished. And if he didn't do at the time, then he would do it later.
Okay, so let's take a look at the law that Jesus would have been using from the Old Testament, from the Old Covenant, from the law of Jehovah. He wasn't using anything from the New Testament or New Covenant, Jonathan. It came from the Old Covenant.
But now when you bring back the name Marianne and her condemnation, then you say, let's go with the New Covenant and forgive this wrong.
Deuteronomy 17:6. Purge the idolater. You must bring out of your gates the man or woman who has done this evil thing, and you must stone that person to death. On the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a man shall be put to death, but he shall not be executed on the testimony of a lone witness. Let me read that again. On the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a man shall be put to death. Okay, once Jesus said, those without sin cast the first stone, and then they all walked away. Once they walked away and there were no more witnesses left to say that she was indeed caught in adultery, there's no way they can condemn her because there's no witnesses. Jesus used this law in order to circumvent having to stone her, and she got to walk away with a pardon. But he shall not be executed on the testimony of a lone witness. And Jesus wasn't even a witness, so he couldn't have condemned her. Deuteronomy 19:15. A lone witness is not sufficient to establish any wrongdoing or sin against a man, regardless of what offense he may have committed. A matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Okay, there aren't 2 or 3 witnesses for the woman who was supposedly caught in adultery. She gets to go free, Jonathan. I hope you understand that. It's not, hey, I'm going to punish you later. No, there were no witnesses to condemn her in the crime, or else they would have been the first ones to throw the stones. The stone pile doesn't get handed to Peter 2,000 years later. Numbers 35:30. This will be a statutory ordinance for you for the generations to come, wherever you live. If anyone kills a person, the murderer is to be put to death on the testimony of the witnesses. But no one is to be put to death based on the testimony of a lone witness. Now, this particular verse is dealing with a murderer. The woman who was supposedly caught in adultery doesn't have anything to do with this one, but even that, the murderer still has to have at least 2 to 3 witnesses in order to be condemned. John 8:10. The woman caught in adultery. When they heard this, they began to go away one by one, beginning with the older ones, until only Jesus was left, with the woman standing there. Then Jesus straightened up and asked her, Woman, where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you? No one, Lord, she answered. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Now go and sin no more. You see how it works with the law in Deuteronomy, Jonathan? That if you don't have those witnesses, you can't be found guilty. You can't be held accountable, and you can't be stoned 2,000 years later for something you think they did.
Jesus saying in the scriptures, "They will be done, Father, and not mine." Now you say, well, Jesus did not accuse and condemn the woman either. So nobody is left to any condemnation. Well, there's going to be the Father. That's why you're blaming everything on Jehovah.
Hebrews 10:28, a call to persevere. but only a fearful expectation of judgment and of raging fire that will consume all adversaries. Anyone who rejected the law of Moses died without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. On the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses.
Wow. Here's the big difference, Jonathan, between how you interpret the story and how somebody else might interpret it. And that difference would be that Jesus never convicted nor even accused the woman for her sin. But instead, he told her to go and sin no more. So why don't we get that same thing from you, Jonathan? Why doesn't your cousin get the same consideration from you? Why don't you just send her on her way and tell her to sin no more?
Why do you insist to keep the old covenant, to say that you will not believe I'm Elijah unless I would perform circumcision, but when it's coming about the judgment over Marianne, then you say, no, it's the New Testament now, the new covenant and the forgiveness of sin, and you don't have to follow the law. What's up with that? It's not very consistent in your objective testing of spirit.
You know what, Jonathan? I think you're going to have to go a little more in depth here and try to explain to me, and everybody else as well, at what point in my presentation did I revert to the new covenant so that I wouldn't have to use the old covenant laws to condemn the woman. Just like the old covenant laws that I've been using to establish circumcision laws and show why I think that you would be breaking the circumcision covenant with the Lord God Jehovah that Elijah's parents had entered him into. But here, you're making the accusation that I used the new covenant laws instead of the old ones, just so that I could show leniency towards the woman that was caught in adultery. However, Jonathan, I really don't think that you can back it up. I mean, show me where that actually happened, because it didn't. I used nothing but the old covenant laws, and you watched me do it. Yet you're still going to sit there and accuse me of somehow switching over to the new covenant. And that way Jesus can get the woman off the hook just by using love and not the law. And you don't like to see that. But that's not what happened.
Thank you, Gene. Mr. Nylon is overturned again, but his head is still stuck up his ass. So I'm sure the overturned king will find a way to, it's already done, to twist the word to fit his purpose again, like the broken record he is throwing Peter at her, lol.
And like I said, Jonathan, show me where you think I did what you say that I did, and if you can show me at least that much, then I'll at least have a better idea of what you're even talking about. Because you brought it up enough times throughout the video that I knew it was something that you were concerned about. I mean, for sure. But as it turned out, Jonathan, it was you who made up the whole thing. Because I didn't use anything besides the old covenant laws to prove my point. And even after knowing that, you still come after me with all your fabricated bullshit, accusing me of switching the covenants, as not to condemn the woman. And I think a lot of other people are catching on too, catching on to all the desperate positioning that you've been doing lately. And some of the word magic connections that you've been coming up with, I mean, they sound desperate. So let's go to John 8, and I'm going to start at verse 3. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down, and with his finger wrote on the ground, as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself, and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down, and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself, and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more.
Hey guys, Jeff Goldtrap here in Nashville with another legal question that's come up. Here's the question. Will the DA dismiss the case if the witness doesn't appear? If the witness doesn't show up? Will the DA dismiss the case? So what will happen is this. Let's say a critical witness, a witness that the state must have to make their case. Let's say that person is not available. They're not in court. They're not going to come to court. And on your behalf, I say, Judge, I'd like to motion to dismiss for failure to prosecute. The judge will simply ask, State of Tennessee or District Attorney, can you go forward? Are you ready? And if they say no, sometimes they will call out the name, witness Jimmy Joe Bob or whatever. If that person doesn't answer, then the state of Tennessee cannot go forward. It's like saying this. It's like saying, will I win the ball game if the other side doesn't show up or doesn't put a field or doesn't put a team on the field? Well, of course I will, because they don't. There's no other team to show up to play against.
Now, you didn't take so much time to think about that one, right? Even though John Quinton is encouraging you. It's been 2,000 years between the two stories. 2,000 years ago, when Jesus said, neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more. 2,000 years later, maybe a couple things happen, which would be, neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more. So in the space of 2,000 years, do you think that she did sin, or for the space of 2,000 years she didn't sin? Why it's now that there is this condemnation? Because it was even recorded that she did sin.
Yes, Jonathan, you're right. It was recorded that she did in fact sin. Just as it was also recorded that all those men who had brought her before Jesus, they too were sinners, and they too were just as guilty as the woman was, at least according to Deuteronomy 22, and those verses concerning the penalty for adultery. Those men were just as guilty as her, and if the woman was going to have to face the death penalty for her sin, those men were going to have to be condemned just as the woman was. I mean, it was the law that both the man and the woman were to be condemned and stoned to death for their sins. So could you at least, agree with that much, Jonathan?
And then in this new series, condemning Marianne with a fistful of Peter, you bring the second covenant. And you don't care anymore about the old. Neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more. Then 2,000 years of time pass, and then maybe she did sin. And that's why now, it was not as soon as she turned and go her way. 2,000 years ago, in between, of when she kissed the foot of Jesus, but then now kicking in the balls the messenger that he sent, because Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciple did baptize.
That's condemning her, Jonathan. Instead of Jesus honoring his word, saying that he didn't condemn her either, you then have Jesus go back on his word and then start.
Why are you not objective in your judgment? She told me that she loved to sleep with the devil. Now, she said that she doesn't mean every word that she's speaking, and she's using a lot of humorous irony, sarcasm. Why don't you judge her as much as you spend effort to judge me? Because you said you don't care about her. Now you're using her to judge me. But you're not just. You're not just in judgment, voice of Gene. And I see that for the sake of the image, you would pick New King James Version, because it's New King James Version that came with the image that you needed. So you would choose the image over the Word of God, because what you're trying to display is an appearance.
Saying that he didn't condemn her either. You then have Jesus go back on his word and then start to throw Peter at her every day until she's dead.
Because you know Peter is a sinner, Jesus is sinless.
I have no
Jesus
battery
can
left
throw Peter at her
on
as
the phone.
to stone her.
Still sticking to the law, I see. And you know what?
You're the one who wanted me to perform circumcision, to stick to the law.
Jonathan, my interpretation of the story of the woman taken in adultery, I'm sure it's flawed in many, many ways. I mean, I have no way of verifying it, and neither do you. But I at least feel confident enough to know that my version of the story at least sounds plausible. I mean, at least in my version of the story, Jesus keeps his word to her. He doesn't just continually barrage her.
But to keep his words, also he had to let not one jot nor tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. So if you want to say the most plausible story is when he keeps his words, then he had also to keep all his words.
Every day with a fistful of Peters.
I believe this, 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 I believe this. I still believe it. I really believe it. I really believe it. I mean, how can I not believe it? And then it's so sure to me that when he changed the name of Simon Bar-Jonah for what Marianne believed at this time, maybe she should say before the carnage goes too far. Did you get a ring for your wife or not?